the Unity for J #ProtectJulian all weekend long online vigil. My name is Suzie Dawson. I am the president of the Internet Party of New Zealand. I am a journalist and an activist, and thank you so much for being here with us. I am going to be with you for about the next 6 hours, and in that 6 hours, we are going to cover 3 continents. I have here with me Helen Razer, comedian and journalist extraordinaire from Australia. Then I will be meeting... Hi, Helen.
I'm not funny at all.
You're really hilarious.
No. By accident. I've never been paid to be funny, so it's not, a professional endorsement.
I get your emails.
No.
I get your emails all the time, and they make me piss myself laughing. Well, but that's another story.
Well, I figure an activist who's in exile, who faces persecution at every turn. What can I do here in the privilege of a cosseted Western nation, but say, hey, here's again for you. Anyway, don't let me interrupt your introduction. Please keep going. Please.
Your exemplary sense of humor is a wonderful counterpoint to the death threats. I promise you that.
Go. What else will we see across these 17 hours where you will be fueled by rage on the internet?
Well, I think this whole project is 49 hours and we've got 48 guests, so it's pretty amazing. After you, I will be going live to the Ecuadorian Embassy in London with activist Emmy Butlin, and she will be hooking me up to interview all of the ground crew, the people there at the embassy protecting Julian, so that will be extremely interesting. Then we're cutting... First, after you, I actually have Alex Hills, who has been running the New Zealand campaign to free Julian Assange. They've done amazing things. Then we'll be going to the Ecuadorian Embassy in London. After that, I'll be interviewing one of my favorite people, who is William Binney, ex-NSA technical director, who's an outstanding brain, an amazingly intelligent guy, and a close friend of Julian. After that, I'll be in San Francisco with Don DeBar, a radio host out there. And then I will be interviewing Patrick Henningsen, who is the editor-in-chief of 21st Century Wire. So it's going to be an action-packed 6 hours for me. Then I'll be handing over to Vivian Kubrick, and she will be interviewing Lee Camp from Redacted Tonight, and then a whole host of other amazing people. So this session will be running for 12 hours, then we'll have a 2-hour break, and then we'll be back for another 12 hours after that.
Well, justice needs a loo break every now and then.
So do our technical team.
Yeah.
Who've been amazing.
And thank you very much. I've engaged in the vigil before, and those activists who can twiddle knobs and whatnot, and be patient with me while I slammed on this borrowed computer. Work, you bugger, work. Thank you so much for your support, comrades. I should say I am a personage of very, very, very modest prominence. I am not, despite what our kind hostess says, a significant figure at all. The only significance to this is, I guess, my work as a journalist, which was once entirely in legacy media and now is not there at all, simply because there's no expression for an idea that is not already the idea of one of the 2 big, powerful classes who are the mirror of each other, which is, of course, the sort of like the ethno-nationalist, nativist, racist poohead, prelude to fascism, or liberal world order. Of course, as many people in the US election of 2016 found, it was more of a case of, poo, I don't like either of them. That is not an acceptable view. And that's why I'm here with you to give it all up for unacceptable views and knowledge and their expression.
And the protection of someone who's pretty great at circulating that in a way that eclipses the mainstream, because WikiLeaks has really pulled the rug out from under mainstream narratives over and over again, and proven that just this Aussie guy, who had a dream of free information and people actually knowing what their governments were doing, and particularly what really secretive intelligence agencies are doing behind the
Mm.
scenes. He believed we have the right to know that information, and he's dedicated his life to bringing that information to us.
Yeah, and so a recent parallel that struck me is because I've had a long interest, and one that I've more lately begun to write about, in Palestine. Now, it is locally here in Australia. We have a sort of a very nice kind of like liberal progressive lady called, love her music, called Kate Miller-Heidke. Here in Australia, Australia, for whatever reason I don't know, is now part of Eurovision. Now, Roger Waters, I'm sure you know of his work in advancing the BDS cause. Don't worry, Susie, don't look worried. There is a point to what I'm saying. Stop looking worried. It's been incredibly hard to communicate to this woman that I've met personally and shared conversations with, and sort of offered mutual respect. You don't play Israel. There's a good reason that you don't play Israel. And this has been in Australian public life like so unpopular. And there's just, I've discovered, there's this range of causes that are sort of pre-approved. Like, we'll fight for this little bit of justice, but not all the rest. So it's, this is not what happens, but one could be excused if one was of a conspiratorial mind to think that there was a factory somewhere in the West where we tick off the issues that are acceptable for public debate and then we screw all the rest. There has been just a very few moments in the, what is it now, 13-year history of WikiLeaks, when Julian Assange and the WikiLeaks publication itself has been deemed fit for public consumption. The period 2010, for a couple of months, it was okay, to be pro WikiLeaks, because WikiLeaks had uncovered an atrocity, evidence of an atrocity that many people were happy to attribute not to the USA, who let's not forget, in August 1945 did bring out a bit of a big bomb and have been pretty fond of them ever since. But there are a lot of people who are happy to say, well, this is Bush doctrine. This is the work of the Republicans. Of course, it has been, it was first the work of a Democratic Party president. And it has been the work of many Democratic administrations since that time. The US remains the world's hegemon. We live in a unipolar time. Now, it was acceptable for many people in the West to think, well, this was a few bad right-wing apples in the otherwise pure cart of liberty, which is the USA. And in that moment, very briefly, WikiLeaks was acceptable. Chelsea Manning became acceptable, although her current incarceration is of no effing interest to basically anyone I effing know, except for you lot. And it's interesting to consider how people go in and out of acceptability. WikiLeaks remains outside acceptability, but if you stop for a minute and think critically, it has to be acceptable. It has to be something worth fighting for. The bollocks one here is the ludicrous justifications. The publication is too opinionated. Okay, so first, it's a publication of curated documents whose authenticity have never been questioned. Second, there's a very good rationale for the lack of redaction. I know that, Glenn Greenwald, who has my great respect as a journalist, a lovely man, I've met him, he makes a case against redaction, but I know you are probably better to state the WikiLeaks rationale for redaction even more than me. I mean, as far as I understand it, it's like, this is a record for posterity. This is a record for history. The removal of names would be the removal of context for future scholars, journalists, or, indeed people sort of as people have, like seeking the documents from WikiLeaks to fight justice in courts of law. And that's the reason that WikiLeaks doesn't redact, right? It's not just because they're irresponsible, crazy people, right?
Of course not. If anybody knows how those documents should be handled, it would be WikiLeaks, because they've proven their ability to protect their sources and to protect and publish those documents over more than a decade. The redaction debate is a really complex issue, and people seem to think it's really black or white. And I personally don't see it as black or white at all.
No, it's not.
I think I am definitely on the side, and I've argued in print, I've written articles about this, about the redaction debate. And I personally am on the side of release it all, because I believe the data belongs to the people who have been spied on, to the people who have paid the tax dollars for the agencies who've collected that data. I don't believe that data belongs to those agencies. I believe it belongs to their targets. And myself as a target, the data they have gathered on me belongs to me. And I believe that that data should be returned to the people. However,
I've actually sent invoices to Facebook for the use of my data. I figured they've stolen it from me, and they should probably pay me back, because my data becomes their asset. Like, it is I'm prepared to be to have sort of like a gradation of views on this. I accept that when names or incidents are declared as part of data, as part of a publication, that there can be real human lives imperiled. And I am sometimes a little frustrated by some of the publications or some of the arguments about the publications of WikiLeaks troves, like the claim that the alleged revelation of unacceptable Saudis would lead to death, etc. Like, okay, there's no evidence that anyone has been harmed other than, the dreams of the little girl called Hillary Clinton by WikiLeaks publications. But I do accept that there are valid critiques. I'm not all, hey, it's data, let it be free. And I know that that's not even the WikiLeaks approach. It's not like it's just a great big vomit out onto the internet with no regard for what will occur thereafter. But I think that we sort of have to accept that, as you said initially, that the redaction argument is one that will be ongoing, just as journalism has had ongoing debates about what is and is not ethical since the stupid thing ever began, right? So WikiLeaks is an organization that does think about these things. And frankly, I remember reading, there was the Olympic Games, quite a big thing apparently, happening in Brazil. You remember this occasion?
Yeah, I do, absolutely. And I remember reading in the Snowden files about the NSA's mission to spy on people at that Olympics.
And I remember a ho, 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 hum, hum, hum article, lots of fun, written in a major publication where the journalist, who I believe was not a person who, openly preferred the sexual fulfillment by members of their own gender identity, i.e. a straight person, downloaded Grindr and went around the Olympic Village and divulged some information about those in the Olympic Village who are also on Grindr. If you don't know what Grindr is, it is a matching service for eligible gentlemen to meet each other. So I see, like, the mainstream press just defecate on the privacy of people from, in this case, nations where homosexual acts are actually illegal and say, oh, look at all the gay men in the Olympic Village. And I see incredible violations daily. Here in Australia, our state broadcaster called the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, it is state media, but the good kind, not the bad kind like RT, because apparently there's a difference between good state media and bad state media. I don't know what it is. I think it might be whether you're Western or not. Just putting it out there. Would you agree, Suzie?
Well, I think they've done a good job of pretending that there's some type of independence in Western state media apparatus, and we know that time and again there certainly isn't. Whether it's the BBC or the ABC or the New Zealand Herald, they toe the government line just as much as Russia Today or any other non-Western media might feel they have to toe a government line. So it's universal.
We don't even have anything good like Chris Hedges on the ABC. I could forgive a lot of their crimes if they actually had Chris Hedges on. I like his show. He seems like
he's amazing. He's amazing.
Yeah, he's pretty good. Journalist, I hear too. But so here in Australia, our state broadcaster, which is a pretty big deal here. Like think of like if you're listening in the US and they haven't come for you yet. It's not like PBS. It's like this big influential thing, which is falsely regarded as truth in media. And
it's cultural. It's cultural too, right? Like I know from my parents and my family, get home from work at 5 o'clock, get the dinner ready, watch the 6 o'clock news on the state broadcast television channel every day, 5 days a week. And the worst part is then they actually believe that what they see is what is real.
Well, I gotta say, I mean, to be honest, like I learnt media. I learnt the craft of media. I learnt about editorial policy. I learnt about, the responsibility to an audience from the ABC. I was a 21-year-old lady, and that was where my first gig accidentally was, just by happenstance. And foolishly, I actually believed the things that I was hearing about accuracy and about the responsibility to the audience and about showing all sides, because remember, there's not just two, of a story, of not falling into either visual, written or audible pre-existing ideas about what sort of person someone was. It went down to, like, if you're doing a story on shopping, don't always interview women, right? Yeah, good idea. When you're doing a story on WikiLeaks, don't always interview deluded idiots with some conspiracy shit for a brain who keep insisting through their arse mouths. I'm sorry for my sewer language.
Luke Harding for the Guardian Classic example. Last person who should ever be interviewed about.
The very best one can hope to read or hear in mainstream Australian media is that, well, he might be guilty of all sorts and sorts and sorts of things, but we probably shouldn't maybe let him go to jail for that long. That is as much as the analysis will allow. That is the absolute hard limit of what constitutes critical thinking and accuracy, which is why I'm no longer allowed into any Australian legacy media building anymore. And it just drives me insane. And what also kind of like makes me crazy is that, there's supposed to be this very tight social media imposed on its journalists. Now, if you have an opinion about something you're likely to cover on your news program or on your lifestyle news program, then, you don't talk about your opinion on social media. Okay, I'm going to agree. Good liberal policy, right? Like, freedom of the press, appearance of objectivity, all that. Awesome. So, Patricia Cavalis, you're a very nice lady, and might I say, quite attractive. And I've met you. And you let me go on your show even to flog my book. Thanks for that. Why are you saying on Twitter that Julian Assange is not a journalist? Okay, you're a member of my union, I'm pretty sure. the MEAA. If you're not, you're a fucking scab. Sorry. Pat's not like that. She's lovely. But why is she permitted to say that when she, a member of my trade union for media and entertainment and arts people here, and the journalists union here in Australia, they awarded Julian Assange in 2011 and WikiLeaks for their outstanding contribution to journalism. And I'm a proud union member, and I go and yell at them about how I'm not proud of them, you know, because of this pride at many, many meetings. For various reasons. We won't get into Helen, the trade union. It's a long and boring story. But what isn't a boring story is that the solidarity of people in the same profession has just disappeared. What Patricia Kovalis said was that Julian Assange isn't a journalist, he is a misogynist. Now, given the fact that I do know one or two misogynist journalists and they're still in business, and, you know, and for all your Me Too whining in the media, ladies, what have you done for those of us who have experienced sexual assault in the workplace? Have you gone to your union? Have you expressed solidarity? How do you explain to me the sexual assault I received myself at the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, right? Like, it happens. People are misogynist. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they're not also journalists. I have no opinion about what is in Comrade Assange's head. I mean, I do tell him off when he does those sexist tweets because, gee, they shit me. But then again, I suppose when you've been in prison for how many years is it now? You do go a bit loopy and you're not up for some good feminist theory debate. So for a prominent Australian journalist who's actually personally been very nice to me and more generous than most, to say he's not, and you can see this on Twitter, he is not a journalist, he is a misogynist, when she knows very well that our industry is packed with journalist misogynists. Stuff it. And Michael Rowlands, you also let me on your breakfast program on ABC TV to flog another book. Thanks very much for that. I just got $30 royalty check. Awesome. But you also say that Julian Assange is not a journalist. Now, you know, nice little breakfast show. You talk to idiots like me who've just written books and you talk about lifestyle diets. You do a little bit of news, but nothing new. So you're more of a journalist than Assange. Mate, it doesn't matter. You know, you might disapprove of the contents of a publication, but you do not turn your back on a comrade. And if you're prepared to let Julian Assange go to prison under a Trump administration that you allegedly despise, then what are you going to do when they come for me? Which they will. Have you not noticed that fascism is on the rise all across the West? And you sit there in your sham of a bourgeois breakfast parody of journalism while Nazis roam the streets all around the world, including in Melbourne. I live in Melbourne. I live in the home of the largest Holocaust survivor population outside Israel. At my park, on the first Shabbat of the year, I saw a swastika daubed on kids' playground equipment used by little Jewish babies. Last I saw, during Hanukkah, it's next to a synagogue. And what do? You bourgeois, deluded liberal media class, but tell me that fascists are ridiculous. Ha ha ha, let's laugh at them. Tell your ruling class identified self that if we were only like you, on our Twitter account saying Julian Assange is not a proper journalist, I'm the proper journalist, while you let the rise in my suburb of fascists. There were actually Nazis on St Kilda Beach, the Jewish home of a city, on the first Shabbat of the year, which also happened to be the 100th birthday of the Nazi Party. If you are happy to go on seeing nothing but liberal justice working, then you are not seeing the shadow of fascism, which is what happens when the press stops telling the truth and starts caressing its own genitals and that of the ruling class. And that's all you do, Michael Rollins. And you too, Virginia Trioli. I know you're a lovely lady and you dress so well. And my God, to look like that at any age, I'd love it. But do you not understand that fascism is what happens when imperialism loses control, as it inevitably does? And do you not understand that the person who is either insane or curious, and probably both enough, to give you a sense of the worst imperial crimes committed is not doing a service to what you imagine is fascism, but is doing their best to wipe it out? So I am beyond sick of hypocrisy. You know, everybody's going on and on and on about how much, every white liberal is going on about how much they care about people of colour, and they will sit there on their lifestyle breakfast programs, which claim to be journalism much better than that WikiLeaks muck, and they'll say, you know, you may have a brown friend or know someone who has them. They may be triggered by what we call microaggressions. And shit, yeah, you know, clean your filthy white mouths. But could we look at the filthy white weapons that have killed so many of our brown and black brothers and sisters in the global south for a fucking change? Why was the atrocity in Christchurch such a surprise to you, you fucking deluded idiots? It makes me want to weep. And no, I'm not going to talk about my brown friend, because she fucking deserves better than to be instrumentalized for a cause. She's my friend. You know, she's not your property to do your white performance of journalism. Fascism is on the rise. Fascism is now, as it always has been, the shadow of liberalism in decline. Haven't you ever seen a Hitler documentary? My God, there's ads for shit on the History Channel that contain more information and more critical thinking in their heads than you. You sit there and you tell me that WikiLeaks is somehow destructive when the world is falling apart. I don't accept it. I don't want any more comrades of any colour to die. I don't want the zombie minds of liberals trying so ineptly to counteract the living dead of the fascist movement, which is growing around us. You know, a couple of years ago, I was tempted too to say, oh, well, you know, Milo Yiannopoulos, he's just a flash in the pan. And then, you know, when Steve Bannon takes the actual guidebook of Goebbels to propaganda and it works in economic conditions of inequality, pretty much statistically equivalent to those in Weimar Republic Germany, I thought, oh, well, it's just, you know, a little bit of performance and, you know, that's all right. It is impossible to know anything about the West and not know that the fascist right is rising. And if you keep attributing this to the reason of, oh, well, they're uneducated and we can't educate them, then you don't understand power and you don't understand fascism. And you think that it's stupid white people who are responsible for it and not actually a tried and true system of acquiring foot soldiers for your petty bourgeois campaign. Do us a favour and read a bit of fucking Trotsky, you idiots. Failing that, you could always try WikiLeaks. I hear it's a good document which has no opinion and entirely accurate documents so that they have never had to print a retraction. So consider the value of the publication that permits us to see history even as it is moving again in precisely the same direction it's moved before. If you think that fascism just happens because people are idiots and they don't have nice jobs on breakfast television, I'm afraid you're a bit of an idiot. Either that or you're just fixed fast to the nourishment that comes from the rectum of the ruling class. Either way, you're not going to die happy. Neither are the rest of us, though, but I guess them's the breaks for your lovely position in media. I'm sorry, I've been going on for too long. This is because I've gone slightly mad.
This is journalism mixed with radical poetry. That's what one of our audience members has just said. There are people almost in tears of joy and despair over the outburst that you just made. Helen, I fucking love interviews where people are real, not where they sit there and act all prim and proper and act all calm and intellectual, but where they actually, you said it yourself, the world is on fire. Why are we calm about that? Why are we okay with that? We can't sit here and be neutral. Anyone who really cares is going to emote. Anyone who really cares is going to get upset, is going to shout and scream. And another audience member just said, she is saying the words that all of us are thinking and all of us are feeling right now. So there is a huge amount of gratitude for you for being honest and for being real. You have the guts and the balls to do that. And one of the questions I wanted to ask you is, where did Julian get the balls to do what he did? Is it an Aussie set of balls? Is there something you get by being born down
Well,
under?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, like, he's not, I mean, like, there's a lot of problems with the movie Risk, but, it depends on how you watch it too. I, found it a pretty interesting document. And at the point where, Gaga is interviewing Julian, and she keeps asking him about his feelings and, his sort of origin story, and he just loses it and says, my feelings are not irrelevant.
Yeah.
One's personal sentiments
about the information
are not relevant to the work. But look, I don't know. I mean, I know that his unorthodox, sort of somewhat isolated upbringing must have played a part. Like, I, for example, am legally blind, and like Assange, I have the misfortune to have like virtually no melanin and be born in a nation with a sun that beats down, and this I guess fetish for the beach and sport and healthy bodies. That sort of started in the 1930s with the eugenics movement here in Australia. We love a little bit of racial hygiene here in Australia. We have our own very strong fascist history. I don't know if you know, but, just like Planned Parenthood in the USA was started by Margaret Sanger, one of Hillary's idols, actually. She made some unequivocally eugenicist statements. And here in Australia, what we have was called the Family Planning Clinic. I think it might be called Relationships Australia or something. That was initially the Racial Hygiene Association. So we have this image of bronzed white bodies. And when you are like a meek white body and like a nerdy kid, and you have some reason, either physical or cultural, to be socially isolated, and and you're white, like, because all brown and black kids have the experience of social isolation in Australia because it's a very, very, very racist nation. It's legally racist, and it's just vile. I mean, that we produced a homicidal white supremacist should not be a surprise, seeing we've been engaged with our number one big power, the USA, in acts of homicidal white supremacy since Puss was a kitten. Look, I don't know.
But that fascism is systemic, right? And I see this in my study of the intelligence agencies. The intelligence agencies, the security services are the enforcers of imperialism, of empire. You talked about the History Channel and the old Nazi movies. What did they have? Jackbooted thugs, the SS all in black. What do we have? We have helmeted riot police in France. We have now the military controlling the population in France. We had Standing Rock, you know, militarized police forces, the modern day jackbooted thugs.
Oh yeah,
beating people.
There was
beating and abusing and maiming people. I mean, and God, in France, I saw the stats. It was something like 100-something journalists arrested and assaulted. 8 people had lost their eyes. I'm probably misquoting. I think the stats are even higher. If you look at Suzie 3D and then just put France on Twitter search, you'll find like my amplification and coverage of it. This is it. Our governments will shoot us in the face if we disagree with them.
Yeah, and it depends, but it's different in different nations and it's different in different platforms. So I'm not precisely saying that imperialism is fascism. Like liberal imperialism and fascism are 2 different systems. There are plenty of people who have argued, as you will, that there is no meaningful difference. But just to be a bit of a pain in the arse about it, fascism is not the necessary reaction, but the organised barbarism of a reaction to liberal order. Now, I think that I can have a bet both ways here. I can agree with you that what we have before us is fascism, or I can say that sectarian violence that is fueled by the fiction of race, the invented fiction. The West is pretty much responsible for that. You know, race, the concept of race begins the era of modernity, hundreds of years ago. So you can have all of these kind liberal words, and such as we hear from, some of the journalists that I've just spoken about. And when an act of atrocity that we can't look away from, such as the massacre of Muslim brothers and sisters at Friday prayer in your nation state, the one that you probably do or don't have a passport for, I can't keep up. But, so that's an act that we can't look away from, because it's just there. And we say, well, that's, the fascist. When in actual fact, that supremacism, that fascism, that racist fascism has been produced and tested previously in history several times as the answer to a liberal order that is falling down. So you can view them as the same thing if you want, and you can view it as strategically done if you wish. I prefer to think of it as a historical conversation, and I prefer not to think of my liberal worker comrades in my union as actively or consciously supporting the ruling class. The terrifying thing is, and Greenwald has written a little on this, and then there's all these French wankers who've written a lot on it. The power of ideology is extraordinary. It's not just a narrative that is written and that people learn and repeat because they're frightened. The fear and the formation of ideology comes in so many different ways. And it's as stupid and as small-minded in many ways as racist fascism. But I'm still going to say that I think that liberalism and the journalists of the liberal West who love all of those ideas are not actually cynical. They're just in a position where their brains have been slowly eaten by zombie forces, and they've been replaced with a happy clockwork Mickey Mouse that says, USA, okay. And there's so many things that make this happen, and it's like, way better than me, like sort of saying what you reckon and like having a hissy fit every now and then doesn't make any friends, does it? Like I'm almost entirely...
No, but it means that your integrity is intact.
We
can do socially as in graces, but then that does make us the MSM. And just about what I wanted to say, I'm sorry to interrupt. I wanted to just respond to what you said earlier about this Aussie journalist who said Julian Assange isn't a journalist. The mainstream media are the competitors of WikiLeaks. Who makes them the arbiters of who's a journalist? I remember a mainstream media journalist telling me in 2011 in Auckland that what I did wasn't journalism because I embedded tweets in my articles and I put hyperlinks to source material. And she said, we don't do that. Real journalists don't link to tweets. Well, fast forward 7.5 years, and every single goddamn mainstream media journalist is embedding tweets in their articles and putting hyperlinks.
Oh,
why?
Yeah.
Because they had to up their game to match what we were doing. They took their cues from us.
I mean, you know, communication, particularly in the age of mass and now sort of niche fractured communication, changes by its nature, right? Changes because of the technology and it changes because of the time. So I wouldn't just say it was WikiLeaks only, you know, that's a big claim to make. I mean, but of course, you know, the work of citizen journalists has had a great impact. And, you know, like so many things in the West, you know, they, the bourgeois class, sorry, I'm sounding all Marxist because I'm a secret communist. Hello, ASIO. I like to think of my national security agency and how they're forced to listen to me bang on. Sometimes it's like, oh my God, there's some poor dude or dudette there in Canberra thinking, oh shit, I have to listen to Helen Razer go on again. I mean, I do feel sorry for them. I wouldn't listen to me if you paid me. I mean, Christ. But so, yeah, like there's that ruling class habit of adopting you know, marginal habits and marginal speech to make itself look modern and hip. But it's more than a case of just journalists being assholes or, you know, like, let's be kind and say, like, brain dead. You know, because like the zombie beast that lives in the historical traditions of thought we don't admit we retain has like munched on its brains, because they're terrified too, you know. We're all effing terrified for good reason. So, I don't want to contradict you. I mean, of course, but it's not just the techniques. It's basically, I mean, it's not the medium, it's the message that the medium is conveying. And the medium now puts itself in the clothes that were established by you, by WikiLeaks, by journalists and investigators in the global south. And they're making themselves look all sassy and new with their hashtag Me too, but I don't really give a shit about women who are actually abused in the workplace. I'm not going to do a thing about it except publicly cry. So what I am saying is probably a thing that I've forgotten and probably a thing that is just declined.
Unless you were sexually abused by someone for whom it is politically expedient for them to attack over it, in which case you'll see a completely different reaction, in which case you would see the entire world media reporting that that person is a rapist before they'd even been questioned at the police station.
Yeah, I mean, no doubt, you know, the allegations about this Weinstein character are, you know, hideous, if true, like just like feculent, but also like repugnant in the sense that I don't actually find them shocking because I've worked in mediatainment myself. So those things aren't exactly shocking, which is shocking in itself. But, you know, so what do? We make this a cause that is about women in the boardroom as well as women who are picking fruit for 20 cents an hour. No, that is a false equivalence. It's not the same thing. You know, if your rape can be weaponized, you know, to ensure your survival, you know, then it's just not the same. And yes, you know, my heart goes out to those in the C-suites who have experienced assault or discrimination. I'm very, very sorry. But your struggle is not the struggle of most people in the world. And this is the thing that history tells us is unpleasant to hear. when you say, well, these aren't the problems of most people, these are the problems of the ruling class, which is exactly what WikiLeaks has done. You know, like the Vault 7 stuff, for example. Oh, hey, your Samsung smart TV might be having a little bit of a spy on you. Okay, that's kind of good information, right? I'd say that's pretty handy. And I know a little bit about how the Vault 7 volume was researched and how there were conversations between the publisher, WikiLeaks, and some of the companies involved. And I know that there was information responsibly withheld. And I know the information that people got about the way that surveillance comes into their most intimate moments was an important thing to say. But the fact that WikiLeaks keeps showing us that corporate interests, such as, you know, the US military complex, or, you know, the finance centres of the world in the City of London, Wall Street, and now they're all moving over to Silicon Valley. When WikiLeaks publishes something like that and shows us finally how real power, the power held by the truly tiny ruling class, is affecting our lives, that's the thing you can never ever say. And while Assange's position is one that belongs to a particular moment in history, it is a farcical, tragic renovation of all those stories that came before. This person has low morals. This person has no professional tact. This person is not one of us. This person has done a disgusting crime. This person is a narcissist. Hey, maybe one or two of those things happen to be true once in a while. But the stuff is the work. And the stuff is the worker who makes the work, who shows most of the people in the world how power is moving against them. I don't want to listen to you on breakfast television, Michael Rowlands. Tell me that everything is going to be okay. And if it's not, it can be fixed by making better people. How do we make better people? Do we keep giving them pamphlets and telling them the right kind of story? Leaving aside that I've never heard you tell the right kind of story to explain the devastation that ordinary people of all identity categories feel in their lives in Australia. You're not explaining that. You're explaining that through the filter of a very tiny class of people who are culturally and economically protected, who have nice fucking jobs and shit fucking breakfast shows. How dare you call it journalism and not give WikiLeaks at least a little bit of that credit for the journalism it provides. This is not new, what is happening to Julian Assange. This is old as heck. They're a lunatic. Oh my God, burn the witch. Somebody tell Goody Proctor that the one thing in the world that will fix everything, that little bit of poison, because it can't be, you know, say the last 300 years of history. It can't be the decline of the US hegemon. I'm sure we're all making things up. Oh, I mean, stating actual facts that we just pulled out of the arse of the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. For example, you know, who are their sponsors? Are they Thales and Lockheed? I don't know. But they're providing us with an awful lot of information and actually writing opinion about the evil of China. Again, I'm not saying that China is my very best pal, but I'm saying I want a journalism that has a sense of history. I want a journalism which features critical thinking. I'm never really expecting to get much of it, but geez, just as a consumer of news, can you believe one of the few publications I find useful to read alone? And stay doing your breakfast program. Don't worry, liberal order's got another 20, 30 years before the temperature rises 2 degrees and we're all fucking dead. So enjoy that. you know, sorry about your dead children, but you did support their eventual murder. Yeah, you know, I'm just really shat, Suze. I'm just really
I know. I tell you what, I just spent 7 years of my life trying to tell New Zealand that our security agencies were using their counterterrorism resources to spy on dissidents, to spy on Māori activists, to spy on independent journalists, even non-independent journalists, even mainstream journalists were spied on during the GCSB movement, such as Andrea Vance, for example. We know of Nikki Hager would be another one.
Well, they've got to have something to do. I mean, like, you know.
Well, they should have had something to do. And what they
were bored when the Cold War ended. They didn't know what to do, you know.
What they should have been doing is spying on the guy who had bought a bunch of assault rifles after he got back from Pakistan and God knows where else. But no, they weren't. He wasn't on their radar at all. White supremacists weren't on their radar at all. Neo-Nazis weren't on their radar at all. But somehow they had the time, the funding, the personnel, and the military-grade technology to spy on me because I support WikiLeaks and because I investigated the FBI role in New Zealand raiding Kim.com's house. That was all cool to use anti-terrorism legislation and funding and resources to spy on me, but then Christchurch happens and it's, oh, oops, no, he wasn't on our radar, sorry.
Yeah,
no,
I mean, like, you know,
about that guy.
Snowden told us and should have blown our minds, but, you know, Flick Ruby, who I know that you know, has, you know, done her doctoral research in, you know, how in WikiLeaks, inter alia, but in how everyday people like respond to this idea of surveillance. And I'm not going to pretend, even though I have been under surveillance myself, because, you know, why bother actually? Like, I'm a 55-year-old, like, you know, midlife mad spinster that nobody employs. Like, seriously, do you think I'm ever going to put my body on the line? I'm legally blind, people. Look for the white supremacists. Don't look for the mouthy bitches. We do activism clearly. We declare openly what we're doing. You don't need to spy on me and you don't need to spy on Suzie because we're telling you exactly what it is that we do. We haven't learnt the art of subterfuge because we don't want the art of subterfuge to ever be learnt again. Are you with me, Suzie?
I'm totally with you. And as I just said to chat, you know, it's a pity the shooter didn't support WikiLeaks, because if he supported WikiLeaks, he would have been on the radar. And that tells you how messed up the intelligence agencies are.
Yeah, I mean, but as I was saying, like, you know, one of the things that Flick said, and, you know, I did a podcast with Flick, you very kindly listened to it. You know, Flick says that, you know, like, people are still kind of like trying to get into their heads the revelations of Snowden and the revelations of WikiLeaks. This is new information. One of the things I remember Snowden saying at the time was, you know, answering a question around why do they collect all of that information? And his answer simply was because they can. Now, we know of the unwieldy and poorly audited data in the US. You know, it is not used responsibly and no one really knows what they're looking for. They just want to know that they can look at anything they please. The actual real life material result of it is that people like this gig here, who's openly saying, you know, death to America. No, she's not saying that. But like openly saying there's a problem in the West and openly like saying, you know, there's something wrong with globalization. You know, it's actually just an extension of the colonial project, which you being a New Zealander would probably know about like every day more than most, you know, because of the history of New Zealand. You know, here in Australia, we've basically hidden away all evidence of our colonial past from ourselves, and we refuse to say that it informs us. But what has happened in Australia with intelligence services, I can say this because, like, it's on the internet. There's a very funny bloke, doesn't live far. He's called Nazim Hussain, really nice bloke. If you know Amir Rahman as well, you know, I mean, Amir's a mate, but he's not so nice as Nazim. But so these guys, they had this comedy troupe called Fear of a Brown Planet. They still do things together. Nazim became a bit of a celebrity in Australia. He was on one of these reality shows, right? And he tells this stand-up joke about how ASIO took him out for lunch. Like, they really, really investigated him and wanted to know what he was doing, right? Now, if you're Australian, or if you just want to pick up another weird example of how crap security services are in actually doing the work to save us from terrorism that they say they are, look at the report from the Australian Office of Audit for the mega Department of Home Affairs, which is, apart from being outsourced over gosh knows how many private corporations, so that's going to impede your security for a start, the Australian Office for Audit has said that I don't want to misquote it, so don't believe anything I say, but look it up, their investigation into home affairs and its predecessors, that their ability to do their work will be impossible if they keep their records as they have been for a very long time. And so, of course, there is the occasional putative jihadist terrorist that arrives in the West. And here in Melbourne, Christmas before last, round about then, there was a terror attack in Bourke Street, Melbourne. And, oh, no, it was another one. Anyway, the bloke was, denied from the sounds of it, he basically went and said, I want to go to Syria to go and fight for, Allah. So give me a passport. The Department of Immigration said no. His cleric had banned him from the mosque, reported him to officials and said, look, I really would think that you should be looking out for this guy. He's on meth and he's saying some really scary stuff. And eventually he goes with all of the items purchased from a large store for explosives and, kills a bunch of people. And it's like, I've got some of the details wrong, but the basic story's right. The people that may actually be very close to committing acts of actual terror, whether white supremacist or any other flavour you care to mention, I don't really mind. If you save a body, that's a body saved, guys. Why don't you do that work and quit talking to funny comedians from I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, or talking to Suzie, who already tells you what she's up to, right? Like, I mean, why? It's in plain sight. But the effort of press and the governments with which they comply, and of course of corporations whose interests they're all ultimately defending and protecting, they have this very, very complex and intricate systemic habit of not seeing the truth at all. Unvarnished, accurate information is what WikiLeaks gives us. Don't take that away from us. If this really is an open, free, liberal democracy, well, finally stop contradicting yourself and tell me why you are attempting to incarcerate a bloke who publishes information that should be free. And I don't need to tell you, do I, really, people, in the media class, that the Democratic administration didn't do it for a good legal reason? When you can call a publication a hostile intelligence agency, what's going to happen to your beloved New York Times? The same thing eventually. It's not panic mongering to say that this has happened before, and it is not a delusion to say that it will happen again. It's already happening. Dissenting voices are moved out of or off platforms in a variety of ways. They're financially squeezed out. They're called lunatics. They're damaged in some way or another. And in their place, there is this pantomime that the fascists play of being that marginalised class. Like Geordie Peepee, that guy that bangs on about lobsters and pretends he knows a thing or two. You know who I'm talking about, 12
Jordan B.
Rules.
Peterson.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
I believe his book is called 12 Rules for Being a Deluded Fuckwit. I tried them all.
I thought it was called How to Mix Self-Help Tips with Extreme Politics.
Look, he's basically an infomercial, right? And like you know how his videos go on and on forever? They remind me of people selling the NutriBullet on television. It's like, I don't actually have anything interesting to say, but I'm just going to say it over and over again so it sounds like it's been verified. But so the fact that this guy gets to look not as he is, but as an instrument of a slightly older power that is appealing to the fragile consciousnesses of young white men who didn't get what they were promised in life, but hey, very few of us in history have, that these people, these white supremacist scum, these ethno-nationalist fuckheads are permitted to look like the marginal class who's being silenced just because somebody at a US East Coast university said, I don't want you at my university. Like, these are not the truly marginalized voices. The truly marginalized voices are voices like Susie's, and, you know, and WikiLeaks itself. I'm so sorry. I'm completely off my head now because I'm like super old. I may be going through the menopause any minute. And I don't know if what I feel inside is a furnace of rage or a hormonal flash. Could be a bit of both. But I feel a sense of despair that the thing that is in plain sight, inscribed on walls in the form of a swastika and undisguised in the speech of my fellow comrade journalists here in Australia as, I don't like WikiLeaks, I don't like anything that upsets me, you know, I don't understand how we can't see what is in plain sight. And I can't understand why very, very old, sure, slightly more complex and tricky and technological forms of power are those we seek to shield our eyes from. Keep doing it, you know, keep doing it until the West falls down, as it has been for, you know, in the opinion of some international relations intellectuals for 40 years. But, like, at least leave the rest of us alone to have our little hobbies that surely your great liberal democracy can withstand in peace. Like, either you're good and true and the rule of law will win, or you're not. Like, you can't have your moral contradictions and shove them up your asshole too. You know, that's all I'm saying.
Spot on. I hope that you get to go back and rewatch this video afterwards and check out.
I'll never say it. I'll never say it.
No, get somebody to read you, or I'll pull the chat out somehow and send it to you, because there have been so many comments about you absolutely lauding the things that you've been saying and saying that you're
no. See, you know, I'm a Marxist. I try to avoid. I'm a Marxist, but a natural narcissist. So I try to avoid that kind of, you know. But thank you for the props. My
you have a lot of support out there.
But it's just like, I'm just like, it's been, the thing is, right, it's been my stupid job for a stupid, like, I don't know how long, to think about things, right? And I really appreciate you telling me this is what I want to articulate as well. But it's only an effect of what used to be my fully paid employment that I know how to do this, right? You could do it too. It's in you. I don't thank me. Thank the fact that you have, you know, a partial or emerging or a full consciousness of what power looks like. I mean, fucking everything in the world conspires, everything in the West conspires to make you feel estranged from yourself and your intuition that something is crumbling. So, like, if my rage has made you happy, and if my poor jokes have worked, and if my kind of like near dead, like, spinster figure that has nothing fueling it but like sheer exhaustion from wondering why people who are supposed to be intelligent are so fucking sick, that's not down to me, that's on you. And you're a comrade, right? learn where you can about power, right? It's not a conspiracy, it's a beast. History has a mechanism, and a cog that threatens that mechanism, like Julian Assange is, whatever you think of the fuckwit, an essential one to permit to keep turning, not just because of his broken-hearted mother, who I spoke to today. Jeez, it made me cry, and I didn't think I had a tear left in me. But it's for the future of the children, because the children are our future. Or, don't fucking think about it at all. Watch your fucking breakfast program and tell the bloke in a skinny suit that he is right to criticise naughty, naughty people like Julian Assange in the minutes before his arrest. Any updates, by the way, Suze?
Yeah, here's the latest news from Ecuador, actually. Latest, the Lenin Moreno Government Communications Office tweeted 5 minutes ago that it is false news that the Ecuadorian government will expel Assange, and accuses Assange-friendly groups for spreading the fake news. The National Assembly Commission...
Just a minute, this is the same administration that issued all of those press releases about...
how he had violated the terms and blah, 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 blah.
Bruce the cat. Yeah. By the way, it's very important that you know that Bruce the cat has a safe home with WikiLeaks supporters, people.
Yeah, as soon as the Ecuadorian government tried to use the cat as a pawn to manipulate Julian and to manipulate the public, that's true. The cat was given to WikiLeaks supporters.
If you don't care about this purported freedom of speech that we have in the liberal West, then at least... think about all of the pussycats that might be harmed and instrumentalized, such as Bruce the cat, who is fortunately safe. I love cats, probably about as much as I love dissent.
And also the National Assembly Commission that is investigating the Lenin Moreno corruption INA papers has approved a motion to call the closest persons in Lenin's circle to testify. Lenin's brother has also been ordered to show up too.
I think we change your name to Stalin, Lenin. It's a wrong name you have. It's really, you must know that Lenin wrote, imperialism, capitalism's highest. Give up that name. Don't deserve it. I'm not saying that everything Lenin did was good, but he could write a book.
Awesome. And we are way over time, which is a shame because I feel like I could be here with you for hours quite happily.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. It's so good to do the face-to-face thing, Suzie. And
I was personally spewing when you appeared on previous, but I was spewing when on previous vigils you did appearances and I didn't get to interview you, and I was like totally upset about it. So because I've always wanted to get to talk to you like this and always wanted to interview you. So
what better way to do it than in front of an audience of dozens of people who are not people with clockwork Mickey Mouse zombies for a brain. Congratulations on reviving the undead grey matter in your head. Don't believe the hype, and fuck me, let's end this colonial project. It's been 300 years and I'm a bit sick of it, and oh my God, I have such a problem with white shame. Oh, it's inconvenient. Anyway,
someone says we all need a girls' night out with Suzie and Helen, and someone else said this has been the modern day Sermon on the Mount.
Well, as long as it's an alcohol-free one, because this is me sober. Imagine me drunk. No.
Okay, thank you so much, Helen.
Bye, comrades. And yeah, if you, my Helen Razer with an E, I'm pretty easy to find if you want to have an email chat or whatever. I will welcome the distraction. Fight the power.
Yeah, Helen does an amazing podcast too. That I will find the links and share it to you guys.
Whatever, like you find me somewhere or not. We might, people watching, we might meet or have some little collision in some way at some time. See you later.
Catch you later. Thank you so much, my Aussie mate.